Not only did the NFL lose a legend, but the sports world lost a legend in Jim Brown, who passed away at the age of 87. And we want to talk to our New York Post columnist, Steve Serby. Steve, how you doing, man?
Doing good, Ryan. How about you?
I'm doing well. And when you heard the news today of Jim Brown unfortunately passing away, what was your immediate thoughts when you heard that news?
Well, it's a loss, obviously, that won't soon be forgotten because this guy was, in my view, the greatest football player of all time. I've got him ranked number one. Tom Brady's the GOAT of quarterbacks, but this guy was the GOAT of all GOATs. Jim Brown, greatest football player of all time, Superman, 230 pounds of power and style and speed and endurance and stamina. And Lawrence Taylor, one of my favorite people, wrote a book with Lawrence, but Lawrence to me would be the second greatest player of all time. Jim Brown is number one. Um, just just 230 pounds, never took a playoff, 9 straight years, never missed a game, led the Browns to their last NFL championship in 1964. The Browns, of course, have yet to win a Super Bowl, and the guy was just a freak. He was a force of nature, and I asked Ernie Accorsi, the former Giants GM, if there was anybody who in any way reminded him of Jim Brown over the years. He mentioned Earl Campbell, maybe, and maybe Derrick Henry today, but he's right on when he said there was nobody like Jim Brown. Those guys are not Jim Brown. They'll never be the next Jim Brown. So, yeah, tough loss for the city of Cleveland for sure, the Browns franchise, and the NFL.
Yeah, and Steve, I think when I read your column, there was a lot to take away, and you put it so eloquently when you said he's the goat of goats. He's the greatest running back, and you talk to great Ernie Accorsi, and you talk to these guys, and they have such great admiration for a guy like Jim Brown. And even though my age of 31 years old, and I've grown up loving the NFL, the name Jim Brown. It's synonymous with the NFL. Only playing 9 years in the NFL, but still accomplished so much. Can you just in other terms for us to remember Jim Brown? What is some of the most fond memories you have of just not obviously you weren't there covering him, but like just knowing about his history and legacy? What are some of your biggest memories of Jim Brown himself?
Well, growing up as a New York sports fan, I rooted for all the New York sports teams growing up in North Massapequa, Long Island. Um, but obviously, the Giants were one of those teams, and his battles, his wars with middle linebacker Sam Huff were legendary. And I spoke with John Mara, the Giants co-owner, and John was a young boy who just started working on the sidelines and appreciating pro football. His father, of course, was the legendary late great Wellington Mara, and John Mara to this day can remember the violence that Sam Huff and Jim Brown delivered to each other, play after play after play, because that was Sam Huff's assignment. His assignment was Jim Brown, whether he had the ball or not, and most of the time he did have the ball. So, Sam Huff had a documentary called "The Violent World of Sam Huff," and there was no more violent world than those 3 hours against Jim Brown. And Brown, the thing about Brown also, he retired at 29 years old because he got the movie bug. He loved acting in the movies. And very few guys get to go out on top the way he did. Um, it was the year after the Browns won the NFL championship, beating the Baltimore Colts.
Mm.
But 29 years old, Art Modell kind of ticked him off because Modell wasn't crazy about him starting this movie career and wanted to fine him for not showing up at training camp. And Jim Brown said, "Okay, you can take that ball and shove it." And he just started a movie career for himself, The Dirty Dozen, etc. Now he was I called him the perfect football player, but not the perfect man, an imperfect man, because his image was tarnished by his anger problems, which led to issues with women, and that's the only tarnish on his image. He did wonders for social justice. He was a friend of Muhammad Ali at a time when Ali refused induction into the army. He helped in Los Angeles with gangs, and so he did a lot of good too. So I don't want to harp on the abuse of women at this point, but the imperfect man was a perfect football player.
Yeah, and there's just so much to talk about when it comes to Jim Brown and the life and career that he had, and
Yeah, let me just interrupt it.
yeah, yeah, and of course.
Ernie Accorsi, who's a historian, um, I asked him the very first time he saw Jim Brown play, and he talked about he got two free tickets to a Colts Browns game, and Jim Brown scored 5 touchdowns that day. And this was a day when Johnny Unitas threw for 396 yards, a career high. And the Browns won the game. I think it was 38-31. And of course, he has never forgotten the majesty and the power of Jim Brown. And this guy was, back when the Giants had Ron Dane and Tiki Barber, they called him Thunder and Lightning. Jim Brown was a one-man Thunder and Lightning.
Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up about Jim Brown as we're finishing and wrapping this up, Steve? Just because I know there's so much to talk about his life and career, but yeah, anything else you have?
Um, just that I had some dealings with him, and he was always very cordial. And I remember talking to him after Curtis Martin was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I got him at home, and he raved about Curtis Martin. He was a gentleman to me, and I think he was a gentleman as he mellowed in his later life, no longer fueled by the rage that of bias and inequity that he encountered growing up in Manhasset, Long Island, and then at Syracuse, and then in the NFL. Um, so, yeah, R.I.P. Jim Brown, one of a kind.
One of a kind. Steve, appreciate you as always, man.
And you're one of a kind too, Ryan.